Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fireside Chicago, where we host fireside chats with prominent business leaders from Chicago's business community, live on Zoom with Q&A every Tuesday and Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. I am your host, Tim Shum. I'm also the founder and president of Lucas James Talent Partners. I have a friend of mine on the show today, Colleen Werner. Really excited to have Colleen on the show. She is the founder and CEO of a firm out of Chicago called LulaFit. We're going to get into that in a second. Before we talk to Colleen, I just want to highlight some of the guests that we have coming on in May. As you can see, if you're live with us on Zoom, for the folks that are on the podcast, we basically have every corner of Chicago's business community covered, I think. If you're interested in venture capital, private equity, we have Jimmy and Paul coming on the show from Parker Gale. We have Aaron Levy, who runs a firm called Raise the Bar Consulting. He's a best-selling author. His firm does professional development, leadership, coaching, and consulting to all the major companies here in Chicago. We're going to chat with him early next week. We have our first jam session, as we're calling it here on Fireside Chicago, where we have multiple guests on the show. We're going to be doing a show around heads of sales for technology companies in Chicago. So we have John Repka from Paro, Emma Galler from Built In, Adam Johnson from Active Campaign. We're going to be talking about sales, running a sales organization through COVID, some of the pivots that we've all needed to make during this time. Julie Novak from Party Slate. If you're in the event space, corporate events, weddings, do it yourself for a family member's birthday party, you've probably heard of Party Slate before. They're very well known in that space, kind of a quiet leader here in Chicago. We're going to be talking about Julie and her journey through Party Slate. Amanda Lanner's coming on the show from Jellyvision. I think everybody knows about Jellyvision. It's one of the fastest growing technology companies over the last decade here in Chicago. Really looking forward to talking with her. And then finally, Joe Holberg from Holberg Financial. Holberg Financial focuses on financial literacy, primarily for the millennial workforce, but we're going to be talking about everything personal finance as it relates to COVID. I feel like with this pandemic, a lot of us got caught off guard, and especially if you're not paying attention to your personal finances. So I'm really looking forward to having Joe on board. Moving along. So today we have Colleen Werner from LulaFit. LulaFit was founded in 2014. Over the past 6 years, Colleen and her team have been able to scale this business into multiple cities, have a very well-known brand in the space that they cover. We're going to be talking about that in a second. Prior to starting LulaFit, Colleen was a professional ballet dancer. So we're going to be talking about her experience there and then how that converted to business, as well as some of the recent investment that she's done. So Colleen, welcome to the show. It's nice to see you.
It's good to see you too, Tim. Thanks for having me, and sincerely appreciate you having me first this month and not preceding those wonderful entrepreneurs that I know many of. And
sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. This worked out good. I think
I did not have to follow them.
just for context for everybody. So I've known Colleen 2016, Colleen, you were just a couple years into LulaFit. I had just left corporate America. LulaFit was a small business. Colleen was a gritty entrepreneur, really trying to build this thing, so passionate, working around the clock. And then we've just had like a call or coffee meeting, I think, since then, every 6, 9, 12 months or so. And then every time we catch up, it's just been phenomenal growth, phenomenal in terms of brand and infrastructure. So I definitely wanted to have you on the show. I think there's going to be a lot of takeaways for folks that are interested in business or fitness or real estate, and LulaFit covers all those. So for the attendees, for the listeners, why don't we just start off by talking about what is LulaFit and what does your team do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, LulaFit today is a full tenant experience company. We work primarily in real estate and large enterprises to really build tenant experience programs that cover an array of different areas. Our roots as a company are in wellness. And so as we've kind of been able to grow and expand outside just like traditional wellness offerings, I would call them, so like fitness centers and nutrition programs and spas, we really opened the doors to what wellness can be in the spaces in which we live and work. And today we focus primarily on that physical wellness, but also the social and mental wellness of our end users as well. So You can find us in amenity spaces, if in a large corporate building. So if you work in, any of the World Trade Center buildings in New York or the Aon Center, post office in Chicago, sometimes in those spaces, and then also super high-end residential buildings. So if you have like a floor of amenities, we're typically the building partner, and we power those amenity floors and run all of those programs and operations.
It's been so interesting to see your growth. It went from, Colleen's great, we get along, she's running this fitness company. I didn't really truly understand it at first. And then over the years, I would run into people that live in a high rise in Chicago, or LulaFit is in their corporate high rise building. And they're like, hey, I just got done with a workout. I got done with a yoga session. I got done with whatever. Oh, what do you do for that? Oh, it's a LulaFit program. So you've been able to do an exceptional job with this. Before we get into, the trials and tribulations of an entrepreneur and your journey, what were you doing prior to this? And then how did you make that transition from what you were doing before into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't have a traditional trajectory into entrepreneurship. I was a professional ballet dancer before I started the company, as you mentioned. Which I think looking back, maybe was one of the best professions that could have set me up for the insane career that is being an entrepreneur, especially because I think there's not many things that are more insane to do than to be a ballet dancer. And so, yes, that's what I was doing before. So I danced professionally for, just a little over 10 years, all over the country, New York, Miami, San Francisco. And then I landed in Chicago after college. I took a break in my professional career. I went to the University of Michigan, and then moved here after that. So I was dancing and kind of fell into LulaFit, and that's how we kind of entered through the fitness and wellness space, because that was my background. So yeah. So super interesting. You don't meet a ton of entrepreneurs who are also ballet dancers, although I have met a few, and we all stay in very close contact, because there's definitely something to be said about what it kind of takes, the grit it takes to start a business. And I think you get a lot of that when you're.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I don't know any other former professional ballet dancers other than you. I've seen, I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen the trailer for Black Swan, and that was an intense 2 minutes. It looked like a pretty intense profession. So tell us about that.
Reality of what ballet life is, but there are other better examples. But
it seems like there was an intensity to the career, to the craft. There was a round the clock, all in kind of mentality. I guess that's what I took from that. But can you explain, for those of us that don't understand that lifestyle, what did you go through on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis?
Yeah, so first of all, I did not have a normal upbringing. I lived away from home a lot of the time. I traveled all over the country dancing professionally when I was 14, was when I started, first left home and started to travel by myself places. And it was it's an interesting career because it's very, very independent. There's really no, you're with a larger company and everyone's depending on each other to do well, but it is a very cutthroat, competitive, position to be in. And so you really have to push yourself. There's no one that's going to get you to that professional status other than you and your hard work. And you can't buy it. You can't, and in a lot of ways, you can't even work hard enough to achieve it. You really are never kind of where you want to be. Does it sound familiar? As a little bit as an entrepreneur, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Seeing the parallels here. And so, again, I think it set me up in a lot of ways for really understanding this life feels very familiar to me. I always tell people, I'm at least now I don't have to do it in spandex. So there's a lot of growth to entrepreneurship than ballet.
That's hilarious. What is what was it for you? I mean, you could have just, stuck with some sort of fitness career, worked for somebody else. What was it about your journey, the way that you think, that made you want to start something yourself? Especially since you were a professional dancer, you weren't necessarily working in a corporate environment per se.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I'm not sure I could have really worked for somebody else now that I'm in this position. I think I probably didn't go down a lot of those paths because I just instinctively knew that wasn't going to be where I thrived. I like to take risks. I am not a risk averse person. I really like to take risks, which is funny because my better half is a pretty risk-averse individual. So we
That's
think
fair.
we balanced each other out pretty well. If it was up to me, we'd probably be like living on the street, and luckily we're not. But I think, like I like those challenges head on. So like being an entrepreneur, I think came naturally to me in a lot of those ways. I think, I'll pivot into something else first, which is like, I think what's not been as easy is that I didn't have a traditional background. I never worked for corporate America. Frankly, I never had a traditional like corporate structure or boss, like really before I started my company. And so a lot of the kind of like basics that you would get from just moving up the ranks in a company like that, I just didn't have. In a lot of ways, I think that was beneficial because I was able to really question a lot of the norms that people might consider when they're starting a company, right? It has to be this way. This is what everybody else does. And I never really had those norms to fall back on. And so really every single thing was built like out of the culture I wanted to create, the values that I carried with me from my career and just from my personal life. And so I think like looking back now at the last 6 years, I actually think it was such a huge advantage to really just, not rewrite every rule book, but really question every decision that we made of like, do we have to do it this way just because everybody else does? And a lot of the times I said, no, we don't. And, I think as I got deeper into, the fitness and the real estate community in Chicago, it just became really apparent that there was just a lot more there. I mean, just for me, I'm not the kind of person who wants to scratch the surface. This is definitely not where we are now as a company, is definitely not where we're going to be forever. I constantly have this like, vision to keep growing, shifting, getting better, whether it's, huge leaps or just like incrementally every day. And I think, one of the biggest things for me is that like when we first came on the scene in 2014, real estate amenities were really not a thing in Chicago. I mean, you were going to your building and taking complimentary yoga classes. And I remember the first few meetings when I really pitched that to landlords, and pretty much the only one who didn't laugh me out of the room was the Fifields, Brandy and Steve Fifield. So thank you to them for saying yes and giving me
Shout out to them.
Yeah, but it really was like unheard of. And I think once I kind of opened that door and gained the trust of the real estate community, which is like the position that we're in now, which is amazing. It's really like the things that you can do when you start to affect the built world, right? The places that we go every single day and that we come home to every single day. I think I just saw a lot of ways to do things better. And so I just kept going with those gut instincts of, moving and pivoting in directions in which we could improve efficiencies, experiences, space. And so that's kind of, how we've gotten here. And I think first and foremost, the number one thing was hiring the right people and building the right team. And like at the end of the day, being an entrepreneur, the main difference between being a ballet dancer and being an entrepreneur or CEO is that it has nothing to do with you at the end of the day. Like it is really the skill sets of the people that you bring on and firing yourself from every single role that you ever create in the company, which I tell my team a lot. And I think, whether it was luck or some instinct about people, I did that really well. And I have the most, kick butt team that money can't buy them, right? Honestly. So it's been very cool to watch that kind of unfold.
So what was it let's talk about like the first couple of years. My firm, I'm at year 2. I can go back to like certain inflection points in our journey that gave us a leap forward. And a lot of times for me, it was me looking in the mirror and doing things differently or learning something from a counterpart, a mentor, a book, YouTube video on how to be successful, what have you. Talk about the first couple of years and how you developed as a business owner, a leader during that time.
Yeah. I think because I didn't have so much of that background, I leaned on a lot of the resources that you just mentioned, right? So I knew that if I was going to kind of step into an arena that was very unknown for me, and honestly being like I would call myself a recovering perfectionist, I really wanted to do it well. And so not only did I turn to books and to podcasts and to, like TED Talks and, all these different the aspects where I could learn. I collected mentors And people who were good at their one thing or their many things, like they were like collectibles. Like I was like, great. Like, I mean, that's how I met you, right? That's how I met you. It's like, great, you guys are good at this. Like, I'm going to spend as much time around you as possible, absorb as much as I can, information that I can. So I would say like the first 2 years of my journey was very solo still. I did not hire my first full-time employee until 2016. And in fact, I was still dancing professionally until the end of 2016. So it was a crazy ride. I was literally in the studio. I would get up at like the crack of like 4 in the morning. I would train and teach our classes that we were doing in these buildings. I would go to rehearsal for 8 hours. On a lunch break, I would like jump in my car, drive to the Loop because we were up at like Elston and like Clybourne or North or something. Jump in my car, go to the Loop, change into a suit in like an alleyway. I can't even make this up. This literally happened. People would like see me, like run into a meeting with a landlord, a real estate developer, run back out, change back, drive up to rehearsal, and do it all over again. Like it's hard to even remember like those first 2 years. I mean, and then one day in 2016, I kind of like woke up. We had, I think, 18 buildings. It was like it was like unreal, really. It was an unreal experience. And I sat down with one of my now board members, and he looked at me and he said, "You need help." Like it was almost like an intervention. He's like, "You need help. You need to hire somebody." And so I hired my head of operations, who was amazing. She was with us for I think like 3 years, and she actually ended up leaving and going start her own company because she's awesome. She's an awesome entrepreneur as well. But that really saved me. Like I don't think we would have overcome that next hurdle, and we ended up growing by 400% in 2016, and we actually just did it again last year in 2019. So I mean, those huge moments of growth, that crazy ride, it's a lot of fun. But if you don't stop in the middle and say, okay, what do I need to do next to prevent this from being like a very slippery slope back downwards when we can't actually, deliver for our clients, you got to have those moments. And I think, luckily, whether it was just luck hit me over the head again and I realized it, or, enough mentors were in my head kind of saying, hey, you need to start to build a team. You need to start to build help. So yeah, the first couple of years were pretty nuts. I would like to say I don't know what I'm doing now, but I definitely had no idea what I was doing then. So
there's a couple takeaways I picked up on from what you had just said. We talk about the concept of 0 days, as we call it. I picked that up somewhere. I didn't come up with that, but on our team of, pick a moment in time, 2 years, 5 years down the road. You never want to have a day where you're not moving the needle on various things in order to get yourself towards that goal. And from knowing you, my vision of Colleen when we're not around each other is you're bending over backward for your clients, the people around you. You're always working around the clock. And when you do that and you have your mental energy towards a common goal, it's easier to pick your head up every couple months and go, wow, we're that far ahead. Wow, they're that far ahead. And then you look back and you're like, man, we're a long ways away from where we were at before. Yeah. And I feel like every time we talk, there's something there. The other thing you had mentioned, I picked this up recently too, the concept of the 33% rule. Spend 33% of your time with people that are have more experience than you, at a place that you want to be one day, that you can learn stuff from, you can pick their brain. 33% of your time with someone that's your peer, right? So, hey, let me jump on the phone with Colleen and pick her brain on this topic. We're not in the same industry. Let me see how she would maybe tackle this because she's outside of my space. And then 33% of your time paying it forward. And once I picked that up, I feel like most of the most successful people that I run into, including yourself, really embrace that and look in the mirror and don't have any ego about themselves and just say, I'm not 100% at everything. I might be good at some things, but who can I surround myself with that's going to make me successful overall?
Yeah, I mean, that's been my philosophy day one. And, the toughest part, which is really, I think the best thing that, I learned early on with being an entrepreneur and being a leader of a company is just, you cannot keep your head buried in the weeds. That's the easy part. The easy part is focusing on what you're doing right now, like the immediate goal in front of you. The hard part is coming back up and getting your head above it and saying, okay, great, now where do we go next? And so I think I've always probably, again, like going back to like how you have to be as a ballet dancer, I think I've always been good at like bouncing back and forth from those two roles. And I would say, given our current state right now, right, with coronavirus, that's been something I've had to lean on really heavily. Like I cannot wake up every day and help us survive. I just can't. Or we might as well pack our bags and go home. And I tell my team that pretty frequently. It's like, I have no interest in survival, none. I would rather die scaling Everest than be sitting, in my car at base camp. So my mission is to keep us growing and to keep the company moving forward and to innovate and get better and deliver something better for our clients and deliver something better for our staff and all those different things. And so I have to rely on other people to keep their heads down and keep their heads in the weeds. And I, can go down there and work on problems with them, but then I have to come back up. And so if you don't have the right team in place of employees but also mentors, peers, like you said, and people that you're mentoring, you just can't keep that balance. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I like that 33% rule.
What's like a nugget that you learned over the last 6 years that when you look back, you might have thought differently about the topic, but now after looking back, you were like, okay, that person's right. I'm glad I hired this person as a leader on my team, or I'm glad I tapped into this mentor because they are for sure better than I am at this particular thing, and it changed your mindset on whatever that was.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably such a basic one if you're an entrepreneur, but I really early on, like a couple of my mentors were very adamant on like, if your gut is telling you that this is not the right person, you've got to move on from the relationship quickly when it comes to an employee. And I talk about this a lot. I'm an extremely empathetic person. And for a long time, I really thought that was a negative thing. I was almost like ashamed of it. Like I can't be a good leader if I'm also empathetic. And I think what my mentors have helped me understand is that being empathetic and being a good leader can coexist. But at the same time, I have to sometimes use my empathy to the other people that are relying on me to be a good leader. And so sometimes when it's time to end a relationship with an employee that I care deeply about, because I care deeply about all of my employees, or a client or anybody, right? I have to start, so I've started to use that empathy in like almost the reverse way. Like there's 100 other people who are relying on me to make this decision with this one person to help all of us move forward and to get better. But that was really difficult for me early on. I would hang on to people until the last breath in hopes that I could help them get where they need to be, make them better. And I'm sure if anyone on here owns a business, you're cracking up because you just can't do that. And as soon as you have that gut instinct of like, this is not right, that there's just that inner voice that tells you like, oh boy, this is not going to get better. This is not going to work. There's nothing that I have in my power that I can do to make this better. You have got to cut bait and move on. And I don't even think this is me personally. I think it's just really difficult for anybody to do that. So I wish I could have listened to that sooner. It could have saved me a lot of money, heartache, tears, like distress, tough phone calls, all the above. So
yeah, a mentor of mine told me this once: you're judged more so by the decisions that you don't make than the decisions that you do. If you're a manager, leader, business owner, CEO, whatever, you make a million decisions every day, every week. Some are small, you got to make them quick, not worry about them. Some you really have to put some thought into. But those around you don't necessarily see that. They see maybe the employee that's infecting the culture in a negative way. They see someone that's bringing down the performance level of everybody else. And to your point, it might just not be a good fit, and they can thrive somewhere else. But it's on you to make that decision, which is tough to do sometimes.
Yeah. And for me, people has always been probably one of my greatest strengths and my greatest weaknesses, because for me, like this company, these people are my family, and so and I rely on them to survive and vice versa. Right. So that's been like an interesting balance to strike. But, I think over time I've gotten better at it, and I'm sure I have 100 million more mistakes, God willing, I have a lot more mistakes to make in the future. And I look forward to those because I learn something from them every time, and that's part of it. Like if you're
That's well put.
if you don't want to make mistakes, then being an entrepreneur is not the right career path.
I think that's such a good point. I just switching gears a little bit. So Colleen's husband, Jeremy, who I've met a few times, investment banker, private equity background, financial wizard, like business acumen through the roof. Speaking to your point around like having people, surrounding yourself with the right people, that's not a strength of mine. I needed to go out and basically hire an interim chief financial officer for projects ongoing, just to help like model this out. If I'm not financially literate in my business, then I might be making decisions based on emotion or feel, and I might be running into the ground, even though we might be doing well in other areas. Not saying this was the case for you, but I got to imagine that you talk about work sometimes at home. Over the last 6 years, it's come up. And then maybe just kind of get into the relationship that Jeremy has with the business now.
Yeah, so this has been definitely like a theme that we've been discussing for the last 6 years, but the last year. So I'll unload the plot twist first. Jeremy is now the CFO of LulaFit, he came on last July, and I think a lot of people were like jaw dropped shocked. They were like, "What?" Like he joined. I mean, he literally came from one of the most esteemed family offices in Chicago, and
Totally
made a lot of money. And then he joined LulaFit. He's now the lowest paid employee in the entire company. I can't even make that up. It's true. But we, again, like I talked a lot about how this business is like my family, and like it really was a family business from day one. I mean, he helps me every step of the way. We spent every night and all of our weekends like building this company. And when we were kind of presented actually from somebody else with this idea for him to join the firm, I think we both had to think about it for a minute. Like, is this something that we really want to do? Is this a position that we want to put ourselves in? Can we handle it? I mean, obviously, we've been married for 4 years. So this month, we have an awesome, marriage, but we've always worked separately. And so we kind of did this like interim, like, all right, like you're going to come on for like 6 months. Like we'll see kind of like, it's going to be like this interim CFO kind of thing. I think about like a month or two in, it was so clear that like this works for us actually better than him not being in the company. And I've met a ton of husbands and wives who work together. I think everybody has like their own unique way of going about it. And obviously if you're an entrepreneur and you're married, like that person's in the bit, like if they're not, like you should be asking questions because it's so all consuming to start a company and to do what we do. Right. And so if they're not like on board, it's difficult. And so I think for us, like when Jeremy came on, one, having the chief financial officer of your company, someone that you can trust implicitly, like with your life, it just has a ton of benefits. There's like nobody I would trust more, right? I always say like, he's really my boss now because he tells people like, he tells me what we can do and what we can't do. But there's also this thing that happened where at first, right, our lives were spent on the nights and weekends talking about LulaFit. And now we get to talk about it at the office. Like we have regularly scheduled one-on-one meetings every week, and we sit down just like I would with any other employee, and we have an agenda just like I would with any other meeting. And so that's been just such a breath of fresh air. I almost feel like we've gotten like our other life back in a lot of ways, because on Sunday we're cooking dinner and walking our dog instead of doing financial modeling. And and I know that sounds like totally insane, but it's really been like a blessing, and it works for us. So as long as it keeps working, I think we're excited to keep seeing how it goes. But yeah.
That's awesome. That's very cool. It's a cool story. It's a cool story. It's not very common, and it looks like things are working out well, and I'm happy to hear that it's good on all ends, personal and professional. Just switching gears a little bit, like last topic, and then we'll get to some Q&A. This COVID-19 situation escalated quickly for all of us. This was like something that's happening in another country. And then it's like, there's a couple state cases in the States. And then there was like a work from home thing that was kind of like the buzz. And then it was like, oh, okay, like this is going to be impacting all of us in different ways. I can relate to, almost a adrenaline rush moment where it was like, I got to look at things differently. I got to make some changes. I got to change the strategy a little bit.
Yeah.
This is on my shoulders. Walk us through like your February into March, and maybe some of the changes you made to LulaFit up until now.
Yeah, they were pretty rough. I mean, the first couple weeks was like the most distressing time, I think, of my career thus far. And it's actually, I would preface this with saying, like, I feel incredibly lucky to be where we are today, which I feel a lot, I feel very confident about where we are and what we're doing. But it took, like, we literally had to like reinvent our business and launch a completely new business model. So I'll talk about that. So like right at the beginning of March, my product team came to me, my technology team came to me and said, there's this thing going on, and we are completely relying on having like on-site teams in these large buildings to deliver and operate the spaces and deliver our services. And our technology right now isn't really going to help us like take that outside the four walls of this space. And we think that needs to happen like immediately. And so what we did was we built like a completely new tech product called LulaFit Live. And we have since launched to every single one of our current properties across the country. And almost doubled actually the amount of accounts that we have had prior to COVID, and brought on a ton of new business. I think what we were able to do for real estate is, for the first time ever, your office asset that nobody has been at for 2.5 months is now in the tenants' living rooms every single day. We have 50 live fitness classes a week. We have tons of social events every single week, including this game night that happens every single Wednesday, which has been insanely popular. We're doing these huge broker like trivia nights in New York and in Chicago with everybody who's anybody in the real estate community. We have stuff for your dogs, stuff for your kids, stuff for you, from beauty to wellness to food. It's just been insane. And again, like when I talk, I talked a lot about my team, and that was not me, right? That was me being, I think I told you yesterday, I was like in Aspen. I came back, they were like, we're reinventing the company. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? So, I mean, you have got to have good people. And so we retained like just as many of those, people as we possibly could. We battened down the hatches. We built it. We launched it in 2 weeks. And we are actually launching. Yeah, it was crazy times. I don't think anyone on my entire team slept for at least 3 until it went for a week and we realized people were using it and it was exciting. And we are launching like the second version, so V2 of our technology at the end of this month. And it has been such a massive success with the, obviously with the buildings that we're in, we have access to hundreds of thousands of people. It's been such a massive success that we are actually donating $1 for every single person who uses like V2 of our new app to feed America across the country. So we're making a really big push into like, we've gotten incredibly lucky. We feel incredibly fortunate to have kind of like come out the other side of this crisis, able to save jobs, to create jobs. And so we want to give back in any way we can. And so we're excited to kind of use this platform to continue to do that. But we're excited to get back on site and things to open up. We're a people company, right? People first. You can probably tell that's my favorite part about what we do. I mean, obviously the technology is amazing, and it's definitely the beginning of any experience that you have in the 21st century. But I think real estate and wellness, I think those are always going to be people businesses at the core. And so we're excited to get back with our people and continue to do what we do best.
That's so great. Yeah, I feel like, but both of us talk to a lot of folks in different industries, mentors, peers, and there's definitely a theme of phase 1, oh shit, what is this? Kind of brace for impact.
Yeah.
To, make the necessary moves to steer the ship in the right direction based on how this is affecting you. But 3, like how are you pivoting your product, your service, your messaging, the value drivers of your service, maybe your ideal client profile, who you're speaking to, depending on how your buyers are affected by this. I think it's the folks that kind of keep their head in the sand and try to use the playbook that worked, before all this, are going to experience some challenges. So I didn't know about your major pivot with LulaFit Live until we spoke. I think that's fantastic, and kudos to your team for sure.
Thank you. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I would say, like, to any entrepreneur, to any company, like, this is the time that doors are opening. So go find the door, because there's one open in your space. There's one open in your industry. And if you're not an entrepreneur and you're sitting at a company and you're not happy and you want to be, like, personally, I think this is where, like, the best ideas are born, in crisis. It's when there's a need and you have that idea in your mind to go fill it. I don't know. I'm a big, like, cliff jumper. So I would say run off, jump, and, build your wings on the way down. But I know in our space, we see a ton of opportunity in real estate. We're super excited to go kind of build some solutions for it and to keep growing in that way. So yeah, we're excited.
Let's maybe end there. I got a question around that. What advice would you give somebody that is impacted by this in a negative way, furlough, layoff, what have you, or, they just see an opportunity, whatever their financial situation is. But there's a lot of fear and scarcity mindset with all the negative news, the ability to make money in an environment like this, or the ability to make money in the bull market environment that we were just in. There's a lot of fear around that. And I would agree with you, because I did the same thing. Just kind of jump in and figure it out. Mm-hmm. And pick your head up and readjust until, things become less scary. What advice would you give that person that has that idea but might be scared to do so right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I don't know. And I don't want to sound, completely, like, ignoring, like, everything that's going on, but, like, I deeply believe that, like, if you're really going to be an entrepreneur, you can't let fear be a part of your vocabulary. And if you do, but you better use it to your advantage. I just don't think there's always something to be afraid of. In any single market, in any time, any economy, any city, like, there is going to be something that you could always make an excuse of why you wouldn't do it. And so I think it's really, really looking deep and really figuring out, like, am I going to let a circumstance I cannot control hold me back from something that I know I can do? And figure out the pieces that you can control and invest your energy in that. We cannot control coronavirus. We cannot control the economy. We cannot control the government. We just can't. And so, for me, it's like, what can I control? What levers can I pull to make this the clearest path forward, and roadblocks that I can remove, and the rest you just got to navigate. But there's always going to be something to be afraid of. And I think it's just, you have to think of fear as an opportunity. And I don't mean that to sound like cheesy or corny. And I know there's, a lot of bad things going on, and a lot of us are frankly afraid for our lives, right? But I think if you see that opportunity to just, you got to run and pound the door open.
I think that's well said. I'll add, or curious what your thoughts are on this. Every topic that I was uncertain about or feel fearful around, once I researched it and then was resourceful and talked to other people that have done what I want to do, it suddenly became less scary. And you start to understand and find different resources on other people's story, their journey, on how they did it. And then it allows you to kind of navigate your situation. I think, maybe just saying, just go do it might be a little reckless without looking at all the other variables. But I would tell people, hey, jump in, research it, jump in. If you don't feel like you have enough capital, you can go find money, you can raise money. You can talk to a bank. There's friends and family. There's other ways to do things that are less scary.
I'm making the assumption that no one's going to just jump out the window without obviously having some provisions and understanding what space you're in, but not knowing anything about that, right? It's there's going to be a lot of scary stuff in whatever you're going to do. So it's you're going to have to decide what type of risk you want to take and what's best for you. I think when it comes to raising capital, Tim, I mean, honestly, this might not be the best economy to go raise a bunch of debt in, right? So it's figuring out, can I start slower, right? Can I start scrappier? I bootstrapped my company for 4.5 years. it was scary. It was painful. It was a lot of different things, right? But I made a conscious choice to do it that way to protect myself in a lot of ways from, obviously having this on the latter half, which I'm in now, which is not having, I still own the majority of the company. So I think there's a lot of benefit to having to really start to figure out like how, again, what can I control? Do I really need to go raise $5 million and build the whole thing in 6 months? Maybe not, right? Maybe you can build it in 6 years, right? So I think it's figuring out like what that looks like and making decisions, based on the current state of things.
Very well said. We have a few questions from everyone. We're not going to have time to get to everyone. There's kind of a common theme, and I'm curious because LulaFit's, maybe a wellness company, or maybe you've talked about, the crazy like first 2 years of starting a company. What do you do personally, Colleen, to for yourself from a mental, physical wellness standpoint? Given you're an entrepreneur in a fast-paced, rapidly growing company.
Yeah. I would like to say like I wake up every day and like, do meditation for an hour and drink herbal tea. I don't. It doesn't work for me, right? Personally, I'm like, as you can probably tell, I have a lot of energy. And for me, it's like being outside, honestly, has been like the number one most calming thing for me. To just be outside, try to find some green space, walk, move my body. I've been working out a lot now because, I actually have time to do it, which has been great. It's not always like that. I mean, you would think, having a company that's got its roots in wellness that I would like, be making it such a priority. It's not always the reality, right? Like there's other things in life that sometimes are a priority. So I think I've been trying to do that right now. For me, aside from kind of like the daily, the daily, taking care of myself, eating right, working out, paying attention to my stress levels. It's also, I think like the number one thing that I've cut out of my life is just anything that's really doesn't add like a tremendous amount of value. I've just gotten better at saying no. And that goes for people, right? For friends, for events, for all these different things. All the noise is very easy to fall into. And I think like, one of the biggest things is like when I looked at like why mindfulness maybe wasn't working for me as well, I think it's because there was just a lot of other inputs that I was having from a lot of different elements. And so kind of helping to clean those out and clear those out. And now, I can practice mindfulness because I have the time to do that, right? I can work out because I have the time to do that. I can spend time with my family because I've created that time for myself. So I think the number one coping mechanism for me is just putting up barriers. And I think that would have been a different answer a year ago, but it was not as successful.
Very well said, Colleen. Well, I appreciate you carving out the time for us today. I'm sure everybody got a lot of takeaways that they can apply to their situation. Look forward to seeing the future success of you, Jeremy, LulaFit team. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, connect, check out LulaFit, where can they find you and where can they find LulaFit?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me a lot of different places on LinkedIn for sure. Feel free to drop me a note. My email is also just my name at lulafit.com. And our website is LulaFit, LulaFit.com. And we're also, all over social and LinkedIn. So you might even see us in your building when we all. That
sounds good. That sounds good. Well said, Colleen. Have a great rest of the day. Good luck with everything. We'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.